So Richard Dawkins has been challenged by William Lane Craig. All of this went on back in October. William Lane Craig is doing his, Reasonable Faith tour of, I guess, Oxford and a number of other sites across Europe and England. And they've done their best to shame Richard Dawkins into getting on the same stage with him, which he's repeatedly said he would not do. So this is just the last attempt. He said, I've challenged him. If he won't show up, we'll keep an empty chair on the stage for him. And the response afterwards of Richard Dawkins to what was said prompted me to actually watch this video, which just posted today on the Evolution News and Views, the Discovery Institute website. It just was so appalling to me that he would go to those links. Maybe it's all fictitious. It probably were not a literal genocide of the Canaanites, but that's how it's described in the Bible, and therefore William Lane Craig feels obligated to defend that position. And the kind of reasoning that he applies to what should be a detestable moment of, historical genocide it's sickening. And so I completely understand why someone would refuse to stand on the same stage and debate that, because he manages to make it sound, I think, very compelling to people who presuppose the existence of, a just God and the belief in the absolute morality, what he's calling divine command morality, or ethics, divine command. That somehow, because, a voice in your head tells you it's okay, it's all right to kill men, women, and children. He got a lot of the history sort of not wrong, but he argues that some of it could be reinterpreted. So I thought it'd be a good chance here on the show to talk about whether or not Dawkins would have benefited more from being on the stage or not being on the stage. I think it's pretty obvious the way I think. And I wanted to get everyone's kind of take on that.
I think that from now on, we need to open up every Magic Sandwich show and Gin and Tonic show by saying, introducing everyone on the panel and then saying, unfortunately, William Lane Craig was unable to attend. We need to set a little place for him, a little table. Say, well, we challenged him, but he just didn't show up, so he's a chicken shit. That he would do that he would, make it seem like someone has backed out who has not accepted, just shows what a dishonest weasel he truly is. I mean, he really is just a walking embodiment of every underhanded, counterproductive strategy, tactic, or method employed in public debate and discussion.
Do you think there's any purpose? Do you think Dawkins is right not to want to debate him?
Oh, he makes my skin crawl, frankly. But I still agree with Koch that Dawkins should take an up on it. I mean, I do think, actually, that if Dawkins were to show up and absolutely slam the door on Craig's foot, after all of this fanfare, I think it would actually have played out quite well, because he'll just be remembered as the guy who talked all this trash and then got knocked out.
So, I mean, there are a few things. First of all, it's just on the simple popularity thing. And I was just playing around with whatever the Google word insight thing earlier, and it turns out that Dawkins is worth somewhere between 10 and 20 William Lane Craigs in terms of name recognition and popularity and that sort of thing. So, in that sense, giving the guy equal time in the discussion, to an extent, from William Lane Craig's point of view, he wins on the exposure thing just if Dawkins humours his presence, sort of thing. Right? Just from, and to actually get equal time to actually talk while Dawkins is there, it gives his argument more credibility than it's worth. And I would also go, with this pathetic show outing, all these dishonest techniques that Almighty was talking about, I think we ought to set aside 2 chairs, Almighty, one for William Lane Craig and one for God, because according to William Lane Craig, God exists. Right? So the only reason that God won't turn up to prove his existence is because he's too scared to actually prove his existence in an open and fair forum. Actually, let me just add one brief point on the morality thing, which I think was what Concordance was primarily taken aback by, and that's that Craig's justification for this genocide is sort of horrific. That, had these people just actually accepted that God had given their land to someone else, none of them would have had to have died. And this sort of justification would be like saying if all the Poles had just left Poland when Hitler invaded, none of them would have had to have died. Actually, sorry, that's getting into the Godwin's thing. But following on from the Godwin's thing, if God had actually told the Nazis, the Jews all had to get killed, that wouldn't have been wrong in Craig's view. They should have just left, and then they wouldn't have had to be exterminated like that. It's this sort of blaming the victim. It's for genocide. It's crazy.
Concordance, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I think it's what's particularly challenging about someone like William Lane Craig is they are a professionally trained debater. I'll just say it. They're master debaters. He's a master debater, and because he is a master debater, he is very good on the stage at master debating in front of the entire audience in a way that allows people to be persuaded by what sounds like a very slick presentation. But what's missing are the actual arguments. So I would say he's great at argumentation, but he's terrible at arguments. His arguments can be picked apart by a first-year philosophy student, and that's why scholastically, as a scholar, he's not very good, and people don't take him seriously. But when it comes to the stage, he's quite good. He's like an actor or a professional person who presents these types of arguments and writes these. He's a pop philosopher.
I know exactly what you're talking about. He gives the delivery like he knows what he's talking about, like he's giving an obvious argument that everyone should get. That's the demeanor that he has, even though the argument itself, if you actually listen to what he's saying, the argument is crazy. But, the demeanor he presents it in, to me, it reached a condescension, and I think this is where Almighty was going earlier. It just makes your skin crawl.
Well,
but that's what I think. It's so dangerous to get him on the stage next to someone with a powerful argument, but no real training in argumentation. And someone who is a professional scientist or an educator is quite used to presenting factual information, in a didactic way. So we get the sort of questions and answers. But in a debate format, we don't explore it that way. What we do is we have these sort of, like what I always think is the Gish Gallop is a classic example. There is no defense to the Gish Gallop in this format of a debate. You can rattle off 150 points, and your opponent can only really remember and respond to 3 or 4 of them. And so it looks like you've left all these things on the table when, in fact, you just managed to race your way across 15 different points. That's where the danger lies, is that one person may have the truth, but the other person has the bullshit.
That strategy against you is to seize on the one argument they make that is the weakest and then respond only to that one. And he can try some feeble response, as he often does, by saying, well, I noticed that my opponent refused, within his time constraint, refused to address these points and this point. And that's a very common Craig tactic, is throw out 10 things, as you said, hope that you waste all your time addressing 9 out of 10 before you run out of time, and then saying, rather than focusing on any of your 9 responses, which of course are watered down because your attention was so divided, he'll say, well, I noticed that my opponent refused to address the 10th point, and he'll only address the 10th point of his own, because the moment you put one of his arguments in the vicinity of any counter-argument, his argument is going to melt like an ice cube in hell.
Can I just hopefully bring Aaron into the conversation? He's not been with us for some months. It's good to see you back, Aaron. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
That's good. Have you got any observations on what we've been discussing so far?
The first observation I wanted to make is that atheismo, your hair is 2 feet too short. Apart from that, yeah, the Lane Craig thing is only, it seems typical of these kind of public demonstrations that these guys do. And when I went to the seminar with Frank Turek, it was very much the same thing. He was arguing against people he had met. I mean, Dawkins and Hitchens and a few others. And he would bring up these names, and he said that he had debated these guys, supposedly in public forum somewhere. I haven't seen any of them. But he said he's debated all these guys. And then he presents their position in their absence and talks about the things that they believe and the things that they think. And I'm quite sure that were he ever to give a description of what I think or what I believe, it would be nothing close to reality, but he could only argue that in my absence, much the way that Craig did. I also found that his arguments with the justification for children being murdered is because, one, God can do anything he wants, and he's perfectly within his right to kill these children, and the justification being that it's okay to kill all these children because they're going to go to heaven anyway, so you're doing them a favor by slaughtering them.
That raised an eyebrow for me too. That was incredible.
Would they in fact go to heaven?
We have had people justify the murder of their own children on that excuse.
But would they?
You know, the woman that,
because they're non-believers. They wouldn't even go to heaven, would they?
right, but see, we've had people that have murdered their own children and used in the court defense when they're doing it that they're saving them. I mean, that one woman that chased all her children through the house. She had 5 children, and she chased all of them around the house and systematically drowned every one of them in the bathtub. She explained to the officials that she was saving them from the temptations of Satan.
Well,
This was her explanation. So William Lane Craig has used exactly the same argument that many child murderers in this country have already employed, and it didn't work for them, and he should be booed off the stage for trying to use it himself.
The problem is, RN and DPR, you're only looking at the actions of these people from a naturalistic perspective. And I don't know what that means exactly, but apparently it means that you're wrong.
Well, what it means is that we do not assume the existence of a supernatural, which might, if we were correct in our blind speculation, could therefore justify what horrible atrocity we're doing without question. It makes no sense to me to assume that since you want to go this way is the right way to go. It makes no sense to me to blindly speculate what you want things to be and then decide that God has told you that that's how it is and that this is the absolute truth. And if you sit 12 people around the table who have all had a revelation from God, those 12 people will all disagree with each other in whole or in part on practically everything, and yet God is delivering directly these completely contradictory messages to each one of them.